In this video, we dive into the Rippaverse and what it means potentially for Disney. You're probably asking, what the hell is the Rippaverse? We're going to break it all down and discuss it up next.
Welcome to Orange Grove 55.
Welcome aboard to OG 55. In this video, we're going to talk about Eric July's Rippaverse and why it's so important. We're going to explain as to what the Rippaverse is, because I know a lot of my audience might not be familiar with it, and we're going to dive into its importance and significance in regards to our little nerd culture community. But before we dive into that, Mr. Vash Guy, aka Dr. Dre, host of Freshly Squeezed, welcome aboard, sir.
Hey, happy to be here. Glad to be here. I do appreciate you having me come on. This is quite an interesting one, and it actually does. It does have some connection to Disney. I think people will be surprised by that, and I think it's worth bringing up even in that regard. But it's an interesting story, and I'm glad to be a part to tell it. Anyway, if you want to interact with me, you can go ahead and do so right down there at Vash Sky. For all the, as Christine Wastelands McCarthy would say, for all the robust discussion, right? And if you want to see me, well, it's going to be in the channel you're watching right now at Orange Grove 55 at Freshly Squeezed, your source for juicy news and info, squeezed fresh, right from the Grove. All right, let's get going.
Perfect. Now, before we play the trailer to Eric July's Rippaverse, I kind of want to set the table for those of you that are not aware of who Eric July is. What is the Rippaverse? Set the table just a little bit before we watch the trailer. So Eric July is a content creator. I'm actually a big fan of Eric July. I don't agree with him on a lot, but I respect the man's intelligence, the articulate way he argues his point. Really, really smart guy. I've even said on this show, one of the smartest voices in nerd culture, and I stand by that. But basically, Eric July, what he decided to do, he has been unhappy with the way like Disney and even Warner Brothers have really handled like DC, Marvel, Star Wars, and what have you. He's really tired of the kind of the overt political messaging, stuff like that. So, Eric said, I'm going to start my own comic book company. Okay. I'm going to look, if these big studios aren't going to do right by me and make stuff that appeals to me, I'm going to start my own company. And not only did he start his own comic book company / media company, well, the pre-sales have been pretty insane, to say the least. This gentleman has sold, I think, $1.5 million already within like 48 hours or something like that.
within a couple of days, essentially. I mean, it's an astounding amount. The only thing that even came close to this back in the day was a famous comic book artist named Ethan Van Sciver, who put out his Cyberfrog series of comics. The debut, it made over $1 million worth of sales just right off the bat, and that was insane. But that was somebody who was established in the industry. Eric July, he's a relative newcomer, quite frankly, and to have this level of this level of success, these sales, and this level of support is astounding, and it really speaks to the kind of hunger for this kind of stuff that's actually out there.
Yeah, no, 100%. Okay, so what we're gonna do, for those at home, we're going to play the Rippaverse trailer. We're going to play a little bit, stop along the way, discuss it. There's a lot to break down here, and it does relate to Disney very much so. And it relates to Bob Chapek actually quite a bit as well. And we'll get into all of it. So just kind of bear with us, and we'll kind of explain as we go. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Okay.
And let's go ahead and play the Rippaverse. And then, Dre, just kind of stop along the way whenever you feel is appropriate, and we'll kind of talk about it.
Yes, sir.
I'm Eric July, founder, owner, and writer. Welcome to the Ripperverse. The The Ripperverse is the result of a comic book lifer that wanted to be a part of the solution insteed of always griping about the problem. Now, don't get me wrong, this was always a part of my aspirations. However, the current climate certainly sped things up. You've watched some of your favorite comic book characters be bastardized to the point to where they're completely unrecognizable. They're just used as career stepping stones for a lot of writers that don't care about the lore. Some even despise their fans. Those are people that just want to tell stories that represent their social political views, even if they don't make sense for the characters that they're writing. And of course, these mega corporations that control these properties don't exactly make it easy for you to get in and understand what's canon. So maybe it's time for something new.
So that's the kind of the introductory statement right there, and it's kind of a fascinating kind of thing here. He talks about a lot of stuff, whereas like, hey, I wanted to be part of the solution instead of griping about the problem, right? And the problem is how he kind of lays out. There is kind of this thing going on in the comic book community and with comic book writers in general and so forth. People that are relatively young don't necessarily have the deepest amount of respect and love for the characters that they write for. And yeah, I mean, they do kind of use it as career stepping stones in the way that he described. Moreover, they take salaries that are dirt cheap, essentially, just to kind of get in there. And unfortunately, the corporations who control these kind of big companies like DC Comics and Marvel Comics, they don't necessarily care. They're looking for the cheapest workforce anyway. And what that's caused is really some problems for these comic books that have come out. And as you astutely pointed out, Ochi, in the beginning of this video, it really kind of speaks to these fans in general, these people who kind of feel kind of disenfranchised from, these companies, corporations, or these content creators, not really taking their kind of, voice into account. But moreover, what got them involved in the first place is, I think they saw, from their perspective, a lot of their beloved characters, beloved storylines, the canon, as Eric July refers to it, really kind of be mired in kind of this socio-political framework that really kind of degraded what they, their stories, essentially, from speaking from their perspective. Right. And like I said, they felt disenfranchised because of it. We saw this a little bit, in the beginning with kind of Gamergate and how that's kind of translated to other forms of medium, comic books, movies, television, etc. And it is just kind of accelerated from there. Go ahead, OG. You were going to say?
Well, no, I was going to say, Eric. I've been a big fan of Eric's content for a while, and he's even said a lot of the, like you said, the kind of like the socio-political stuff that a lot of these companies kind of insert, in these comic book stories, whether it be in print or in movies or what have you. They right now, it's kind of like trendy, right, to sort of like play to like, well, okay, so it's kind of like a very superficial thing, right? Like, so if we have a black superhero, then the black community will be able to relate to said black superhero. Sure. And Eric July, as a black man, has said many times, like, that's not necessarily the case, right? Like, as a kid, like he was like, I believe he said he was like on the high school track team. Mm-hmm. And he's a black man, right, on the high school track team. And he said he saw more in common with characters like the Flash, which is a traditionally white character, right? And it's like, right, you don't necessarily, it's kind of like a lot of these studios don't understand that. Like, you don't have to look like someone to relate to them. And you can. Obviously, there is a level of like relatability if you look at the character. Look, I'm Italian, right? And there were things in Luca, in Pixar's Luca, that I could relate to and laugh at as an Italian. But that doesn't mean that's the only thing I can possibly connect and resonate with is Luca because I'm an Italian. There are other movies and other characters from different genders and races that I might be able to connect to on different levels. And Eric July touches upon that in a lot of his content. And I think that's very, very important. And in his comic book company, he doesn't want to get into all that stuff. He just wants to make great characters, great stories, and not try to like superficially connect. Just kind of just make great content, great characters, and let the audience kind of like do what they will with it, you know? And I think that's a smart move. I think there's a hunger for that right now.
I think there is. Look, as a person who's kind of a little bit of a mutt when it comes to the various races and heritage and so forth, there's never really going to be anybody in Hollywood or, anybody in these comics or whatever that's really going to be me. It's just not possible. I've never really seen it. And but that doesn't mean I can't, like you said, I can't relate to anybody. I mean, I related to heroes all across the genres. Indiana Jones, looked up to him. Luke Skywalker, all that kind of stuff. And I don't know if anybody's noticed, but they don't really necessarily look like me, and that's okay. I'm perfectly fine with that. I think what Eric July is most upset about, though, is when you take a character, like a Luke Skywalker or a Han Solo, or maybe take a comic book character and you race swap them, gender swap them, or you impart values that maybe aren't consistent with their character or their lore. You do stuff to them that yes, it furthers a message, a narrative, and all that kind of stuff, but it isn't consistent with the story, the character, where they came from, etc. Right? This is where the canon thing really comes into play, and I think that's what he's kind of speaking to. It's like, look, listen, you have characters that are produced, right? That are that make appearances in certain media, right? We should be consistent with those characters. And if you want to have new characters that represent something, someone or something else, you can establish those, right? But be true to the characters that you've created, and be true to the characters that you will eventually create. So I think that's kind of the overarching message here. And honestly, like that does appeal to a lot of people, and we'll get into more of that as we go on here. But let's go further into this.
Yeah.
We are a comic book company first and foremost that will never be forgotten no matter how big this venture gets. And we are guided by a set of principles known as the Ripperverse ethic. You will find this on a page in every single book that we release, and it's a set of standards that we certainly want you to hold us to. There are three main things that we will always emphasize. Number one, respect the customer. We aren't owed your dollar, but we love to have you as longtime supporters. It's going to be up to us to keep you interested and invested. Now, anytime there's passion involved, there's going to be those conflicts, but we'll respect you. So as long as you respect us, it's all about reciprocity.
Respect the customer. That's a huge deal for him, his company. Again, this all kind of comes back to this whole thing of these fans, these kind of people have labeled them all kinds of stuff, the fandom menace, and basically what it comes down to, though, is people who kind of feel jaded. They kind of feel disenfranchised, left behind, abandoned by these content creators who are in charge of these properties, and even go beyond that and kind of almost put them down for attempting to speak up and saying, hey, look, listen, this isn't necessarily consistent with the character that I remember seeing, or this isn't consistent with the story that's already been put in place, and so forth. I mean, and we've seen this, right? We've seen this across Twitter, right, where these content creators get into these kind of Twitter arguments with fans and so forth, and not even hear what they have to say. And I think it really speaks to his kind of point of like respect the customer. We've seen that a lot from these big media entities and these people who actually create content for them. And right. That's why this is kind of a solid value as established by the Ripperverse.
Well, and it's interesting. I used to work at a company years ago. I mean, long time ago, in the early 2000s, right? And I was back then. I was a real big. I'll say it. I was a big Democrat back then, right? Mm-hmm. And I had a John Kerry for president bumper sticker in my cubicle. Okay, and my manager came by and said, "You got to take that down. You can't have that kind of like political messaging in the office." Now, mind you, this wasn't even a customer facing. I was in a cubicle. I was behind the scenes, and it wasn't even allowed back then, in my cubicle, out of sight from clients, right? That was typically for years and years, up until recently, that was kind of like the MO for a lot of companies. You kind of keep politics out of it, and especially when it comes to the customer.
Yes.
And you keep all that out of it. And then now you're starting to see these studios get on Twitter and start to go after fans based on political views, right?
Yes.
And I'm not siding with one view or the other. I'm just saying it's a bad business move when you go on as a big multi-million-dollar or even billion-dollar studio, when you're going in there and getting into the mud with fans over political views. It's never a good look.
Right.
Whether it's a conservative thing or a liberal thing or whatever, it looks bad. And that's why
Yes.
a lot of these companies for years never wanted to get into that. And now all of a sudden it's fine. Well, it's bad business,
It
you
is.
know? And that's why Eric July, with his comic book company, he's saying, you know what, we're going to stay out of that. We're apolitical. We're not getting into that mess. We're going to be apolitical. And that's exactly, to bring it to kind of to Disney, that's exactly what Bob Chapek wanted to do. If you guys remember with the Florida bill, he said he does not want Disney to become a political football.
Yes.
Okay. And then he got pressured and bullied basically into doing the opposite, and it became a political football. Well, Eric July is doing the apolitical thing, and he's already made $1.5 million in comic book sales. There's a market for this. People want to get this stuff out of their content. And Eric July is a smaller kind of peek into that, right? Obviously, Eric isn't on the same level of a Disney, but it kind of goes to show you, though, that the hunger is out there for this kind of stuff. And if Chapek is listening and kind of taking notes, do it, Chapek. Get the politics out, and I think Disney will really benefit from it 100%.
100%. And I think the reason, I mean, you pretty much summed it up right there, but I'll add a little bit to it, right? The reason why your company was like that, and even just within the culture of your company, not even just customer facing, was because politics are inherently divisive, right? And if you're a business, you want to appeal to the broadest demographic possible. Well, unfortunately, some of these companies and some of these content creators have really embraced this kind of this more political mindset, and have really pushed a lot of customers away, and hasn't been the most beneficial policy to have, especially when you're in the content creation and entertainment business. Unfortunately, a lot of these people who are supporting Eric and who Eric is inspiring to become content creators themselves, a lot of these people feel disenfranchised. A lot of these people feel like they've been abandoned, and this issue is not going to go away. This issue, I mean, even if we were to not bring this up and kind of ignore this whole thing, this is why they've been kind of emboldened to do stuff like this. And these companies, unfortunately, have created their own competition because they haven't really spoken. They've really kind of insulated themselves from their audience. And they haven't really kind of, appealed to the largest segment possible. And that's what's kind of inspired this kind of, stuff like the Ripperverse and people kind of pulling back this kind of consumer withdrawal that we are seeing from places like Netflix, Disney, and so forth.
Well, and one of the things too with this is, like, a lot of people in fandom and things like that, they immediately want to go to, well, I disagree with this person, so I want them to be silenced. I don't want them to be heard. I don't want them to be referenced. It's I disagree with them, so completely shut them out.
Yeah. And
here's the thing. It's easy when you agree with someone, it's easy to say, you know what, lift up their voice, right? Lift up their voice, let them be heard.
Sure.
But it shows true character, I think, in my opinion, when you disagree with someone and say, you know what, their voice should still be heard.
Yeah.
I don't agree with Eric July on a lot. Eric July, if you watch his content, he rails. He kind of really goes after Disney. He even questions whether Disney should even exist, and including Warner Brothers and things like that. And I fundamentally disagree with his take on that. 100%. I don't agree with Eric July on politics, on so much. I disagree with this man, but I respect his right to say it. I respect his right to have a voice, be heard, to do his thing. And I think he would respect mine as well, even though we disagree, right?
Sure.
And that's important. That's very, very, very important, I think. A lot of activists talk about, Black-owned businesses and entrepreneurial and Black voices and all this stuff, which is fantastic. But you can't have it conditional, though, right? Yeah. Like, if you're going to root for lifting up Black voices and supporting Black business, it can't be conditional like on the preface of like, well, as long as they agree with me politically, or as long as they have the right viewpoints. That's bullshit. You know,
Exactly.
that's bullshit. Everyone, look, if you're going to raise people up and you're going to support, then support. It shouldn't be so conditional on their politics or their ideology or what movies they do or don't like. It's baloney to me. So, yeah, I mean, again, I disagree with Eric July a lot, but I respect the man. I respect what he's doing here with his comic book company. And I think that it's important, like you said, Dre, to not ignore segments of the fandom that don't feel heard and to allow their voices to be heard, because that's largely why we're in this in the first place. So
exactly, 150%, 150%. And I, you know, I mean, the way I look at it is, hey, if we are in this realm of diversity and inclusion, doesn't that also include diversity and inclusion of thought, of you know, mindset, of background, of all these different things? You know, I think it also includes that as well, and that's, you know, that's, I think, you know, for me, that's definitely the diversity that I want and I crave. It's not just how you look, it's not just how you identify, but it's also, you know, maybe what you think and maybe what you you know, kind of bring to the table in terms of mindset. You know, I definitely want to hear that perspective as well. Now, again, there are limits, right? There, you know, there are extremists and all that kind of stuff, but Eric July is far from an extremist, and I think, you know, I think what he has to say is very, very intriguing, and I think it's intriguing to a lot of other people because he just made 1.5 million in sales. Yeah. So this is kind of the second thing here. I know a lot of people were talking about how Eric July, you know, and what he was doing with Ripperverse was, you know, it's like the other side of the spectrum kind of thing. And I think this will assure people that that's not quite the way it is, right? It's not going from one extreme to the other. So let me go ahead and play this and maybe dispel that a little bit.
Second point of emphasis is canon and continuity. This is an ever-expanding universe. There's going to be many of characters that will be introduced. But when you buy a book from us, you own a piece of history. It matters. These events will not be erased by way of time travel or some multiversal aspect. And number 3, a comprehensive timeline. No matter when you jump into this space, we want to make it easy for you to get caught up on some characters that you're interested in, so we're going to keep the reboots to a minimum. Now don't worry, we know that picking up the pieces is part of the fun, so we're not going to exactly hold your hand. And while I personally value liberty, we're not going to beat you over the head with on-the-nose current politics and current narratives that will completely contradict what it is that we're trying to do here. So whether you're into our main character in our first book, Isam, or you're into Yaira, or you're interested in all of them, will certainly have you as a customer. Your ethnic background or genetic makeup is wholly irrelevant to us.
I think that's a big point. That's a big reason why he's doing this, and that right there just dills it down perfectly. It's your fandom, your your I don't know, supporting of as a customer. It's not conditional on what you think. It's not conditional on who you are. It's literally for anybody who wants to just pick up a comic book. And I think he makes it pretty clear that, you know, these comic books won't be preachy, you know, or won't, you know, make customers kind of feel bad for being who they are, or whatever. It's very much, like Chapek has said before, consumer focused, and it really takes the consumer into account when creating this stuff. And I think it can be a really beneficial thing. Like I said before, these Hollywood industries and these studios and these entertainment companies have kind of insulated themselves from their consumers and have kind of almost pushed them away. Right. And I think it takes a little shakeup like what Eric July is doing to kind of get back to the whole thing of, hey, you know, you should really be in tune with what your consumers want, because you'll lose them. And as somebody who is kind of part of that kind of consumer base, as Eric July is, I think he kind of recognizes what they want, maybe a little bit closer than some of these bigger companies and corporations.
Yeah, no, 100%. 100%. Let's continue. Let's see what else you have to say.
Now, previously being part of comic book fandoms myself, I understand the importance of them. We'll do our jobs to preserve the sanctity on the business end, and we hope you will help us preserve a more healthy and thriving fandom. If we manage to do that, we're going to be very competitive in this market, and we're going to make our mark on this industry. We're not going to be perfect. Errors will be made, but we won't let that stop us from being great.
And that kind of speaks to, a healthy and thriving fan community. Every single fan community is going to have some level of toxicity.
Of course.
But, there's a difference between kind of toxic behavior and people who are genuinely concerned about their characters or stories, what you might be doing with the IP or franchise and so forth. That's different. There's a different thing there. Obviously, the people who kind of want you to, to burn, basically. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to put Eric July in that category when it comes to Disney and so forth. I mean, maybe their ideas of success are maybe different than yours. But a lot of people just feel like, hey, I want Star Wars to be successful. I want Marvel to be successful. I want Disney to be successful in creating these things. And it's like, hey, you're not necessarily doing... you're not really being consistent with the characters and story, and you're not focusing on story, and you're focusing on some other stuff that's really kind of being detrimental to the franchise that I care about.
Right.
And that, it's that kind of stuff. It's a lot of people impart some horrible stuff to these people, but it's why we're in here in this space to begin with.
No, 100%. And that goes back to the whole, studios on social media thing, interacting with fans thing, and the directors and the comic writers and all these people going on Twitter and then interacting and talking shit to fans and going back and forth with fans. Look, maybe I'm old school. I just don't think that's appropriate. I think that as a business, you just stay out of that stuff. If people don't like your movie, they don't like your movie. If people say you're the worst director in the world, you just take the hit. You don't get on social media and then go and try to defend it and attack people. And I think that's a bad look. I think it makes it worse more than anything.
Yeah,
and
you don't pun.
That needs to stop. I think Chapek really needs to rein that stuff in. And man, I mean, it's really the wild, wild west out there with social media, and to have all this talent that's representing the Walt Disney Company out there talking about, well, these fans are this and these fans are that. They got to get out of that. Just ignore it. It's not Disney's job to save the world and heal the world and create world harmony. Disney's job, number one, is to create good content. Disney's job, number one, is to create a product people want to consume. Their job is not to,
moralize, grandstand, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Right. Fix the planet and make sure that, global warming doesn't happen and this, that, and the other. Those are all great causes to be involved in, but that's not Disney's job. Disney is an entertainment company made to create content, number one. And I think a lot of people forgot that, sadly.
Oh, yeah. And to put it worse, I mean, Disney specializes in escapist entertainment. And when it's bogged down by some of these things in the real life, even your ability to, what is it? They have a term for it. Even your ability to escape into these worlds is put in jeopardy. Right. And I think that's that's a big reason why these things are suffering the way they are. But yeah, to your point about content creators actually getting into the muck and mire with fans. I mean, it's just it's like the kind of punching down, and it's just a really bad look, and It pushes people away more than anything else. Doesn't really defend you. It makes you look worse. Well, some of these guys just can't help themselves.
Well, perfect example. For those of you watching at home, you have a favorite YouTuber? Maybe it's me. Maybe it's Fresh Baked. Maybe it's Maxwell Glick, right? It makes a difference when you comment. Let's say you're commenting on Mr. Cheesy Pop, Maxwell Glick's YouTube channel.
Sure.
You make a nice comment. Hey, Max, great video. And Max actually responds and says, "Oh, thanks, Chris," or "Oh, thanks, Dre. I appreciate that, man. That's really nice of you." Your impression of the creator and that brand changes for the positive. wow, I had a really positive interaction with that YouTuber, that content creator. And now you have a different perception of that person, of that brand, right? Well, the same goes for big studios. You're a Star Wars fan, you're a Marvel fan, and if you go on Twitter and you get the Marvel account or the Star Wars account attacking you or trying to argue with you, your perception of that brand is going to go in the negative. You're going to think differently about that brand because of that one person behind that account can completely destroy the way you feel about a brand, or very much taint it. And that's not the way it should be. And
everybody else too. Everybody else looking at that situation will be affected by that, not just the person who was directly involved. So it's you really have to take this thing into account, and that's why I think one of the first things that Bob Chapek should probably do is enact a kind of a maybe a more strict social media policy.
Totally.
I mean, you're representing the Disney company at a certain point, or their franchises or IPs or whatever, and the way some of these people go at it. I mean, it's ridiculous. I think that could have benefited these works had these content creators or contributors not actually attack the fans like they did, or morally grandstand or anything like that. I mean, look, I have thoughts about the Gina Carano situation, but I think even Gina herself would admit that maybe she would have been better served by having maybe a stricter social media policy applied to her, and maybe she'd still be with us. So it does work both ways. But look, I have kind of problems with that, and unfortunately, I mean, I think the fandom was really kind of coming together, especially over the events of Mandalorian season 2, the finale, and stuff like that. People were really coming together, and then when what happens with Gina, it tears it all apart again, and it really undoes a lot of the goodwill that they were on the process of building. Now, some of our co-stars did the same thing, but they didn't suffer necessarily the consequences from that. Yeah, and you have to wonder why, right? But overall, I think a strict social media policy should be put in place, and for the reasons that I laid out there. These things have real repercussion. These things have real damage, and we do this already with like cast members in the parks, right? Their social media presence is very, very strict, very, very locked down. Why can't we have that for some of these higher ups here, who their voices resonate much louder than maybe like a frontline cast member does. It's completely bizarre, and I think Chapek should really kind of enforce kind of a sweeping policy throughout the entire company, saying, "Hey, look, listen, you do business with the mouse, you're going to be maybe as quiet as a mouse, or something." Like that.
Right? No, 100%. Let's continue.
Sure.
So visit Ripperverse.com, where we have our own unique store that is tailor-made for our audience. A lot of our stuff will be released in campaign format with limited edition items, and once they're gone, they're gone. We'll be making books that expand across many different genres, so I'm very confident that we'll have something that is right for you in a series that you'll make your favorite. And one last thing. I started this company with no external investors, and that's something that I like to remain true. Sure, we want to expand in many different avenues, video games, animation, maybe even live action movies, but not if it means selling off assets. We only answer to the customer. We don't want to make the same mistake as the other guys.
And to be fair, I mean, that is, that's kind of where Chapek's at. Now, not maybe necessarily in the business aspect, right? But in that kind of philosophy going forward.
100%.
We're going to be customer focused, and that's going to happen.
No, that's exactly. And that's why I really wanted to talk about this Rippaverse video, this trailer for his comic book company, because it does pertain to Disney. This is the direction that CEO Bob Chapek wants to take Disney.
Yep.
He wants to get out of the political grandstanding and all this other stuff, this extra stuff that's distracting the company, and get back to the core. Get back to the core of just creating good content for everybody. Universal already does it, and Universal's doing just fine. Look, a lot of fans in our community, in our little theme park bubble, they always point to Disney, and Disney needs to speak out about the bill, and Disney needs to this, and Disney needs to that. Universal doesn't do any of that stuff. They don't speak out about any bill or anything like that. And yet the fans still go to Universal in droves. They're still loving Universal. Universal's doing fantastic. So if Universal can do it, Disney can do it. They got to get out of the politics, and they really never should have got into it in the first place. But it's going to take a long time for I think Bob Chapek to sort of undo the damage that has been done. This didn't occur overnight with Disney. They didn't become like overnight a political company. It took many, many years of inserting and kind of, doing this whole thing. It's going to take many, many years now to kind of undo that. If fans want Disney to be more politically neutral, have patience. I think it's a big desire for Bob Chapek to do so, but you're not going to get that next year. You're not going to get that next month. It's going to take time for him to unravel all that, because not only is it hard logistically to unravel all that, but there's also a PR element. He can't move too fast, because then he's in the soup again. He's getting all kinds of heat from the trades and the Hollywood people and all that garbage. So he's got to be careful. He's got to thread that fucking needle, But Netflix is doing it, like you said. Zaslav at Warner Brothers is doing it, and I think Chapek is going to do it as well. He just has to be very, very methodical and kind of slow moving with it. You don't want to move too fast. You're on mute, sir. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. You see, this is why OG's on the show here. They cover me when I make a mistake. No, look, listen, we're already kind of, maybe seeing some changes. Like I said, Kareem Daniel, Bob Chapek, they were in Paris trying to figure out this kind of whole thing here. And apparently they might be implementing like a social media policy or social media kind of, kind of inspired code of conduct for the entire company to kind of adhere to, not too dissimilar actually to what Eric July is doing and imprinting kind of their kind of whole philosophy on every single page. Apparently that's going to be an internal, kind of an internal policy that they're going to have, and apparently will be debuting anywhere between November and kind of March. Anywhere between that kind of length of time there for various reasons, as alluded to by Walt Disney World Pro and Valiant Renegade, who we've highlighted on this channel many, many times. Definitely go check that out, because that's a very interesting kind of thing there. But the idea is, we're seeing the negative effects of this. I mean, look at the Splash Mountain redo, right? The comments are disabled, and the likes and dislikes are turned off and stuff like that. The company's already kind of seeing the effects of maybe not necessarily being 100% in tune with their audience, and it's having a negative effect. We're seeing that kind of at the box office. We're seeing that in kind of manifest itself in other ways here. And I think if they were to continue down that line, it would only get worse and worse as the country becomes more fractured, divided, and all that kind of stuff. And it really, I think, is important. Definitely for Chapek, but just a business-wise for the entire company, that they get away from some of the politically charged stuff and just political neutrality, really. I mean, look, if Rippa starts to, inject a bunch of maybe libertarian or conservative stuff in his comic books, or I don't know, MAGA stuff in his comic books, right? I think, I would have the same criticisms towards him. Right. That I would for another company who was injecting something of the opposite spectrum, because it's like, no, we don't want politics at all. That's the whole point. The whole point is something that's, creating something that's unifying, that's not dividing, that brings people together, that people can kind of, gush over. We really should be talking about the content, not the, maybe the ideological persuasions of the people actually creating them, or some of this kind of other white noise that takes away from the characters and stories that we all care about. It's that kind of whole thing. And hey, look, listen, obviously, as we've found out with $1.5 million in sales, there's absolutely a hunger for that, and we'll just have to kind of see where that goes. It's a very interesting story, though.
No, 100%. And I think also like a big takeaway before we go is just, it's like I said early on in this show, I'm a fan of Eric July. I watch his content, and I disagree with him quite a bit on quite a lot. I hope more fans kind of take this approach where you don't need to live in an echo chamber. You don't need to live in a bubble. It's okay to watch content creators you disagree with. It's okay to have friends you disagree with. It's good to have that variety in your life. and not to constantly be mad because someone else has a different opinion than you do. Look, I would be bored out of my fucking mind if everyone that came on my channel just agreed with me. Yeah, OG, you're right. Yeah, OG, I don't want that. I bring Dre on because he doesn't have the same viewpoints as me. I bring Family Man on because he doesn't have the same viewpoints as me. Alia, I disagree with Alia quite a bit. I have her on the show because we disagree. That's what makes life more interesting,
100%.
And I just wish more fans were open to just hearing out other sides of these arguments. Unfortunately, we live in a very, very my side, your side.
Polarized.
Yeah, too polarized. But yeah, fascinating conversation. I can go on for hours about this, but Dre, thank you so much, brother, for coming on today, talking about the Rippaverse. If you could let everybody home know where they can find you on social media, sir.
Hey, best place to interact with me is going to be on @VashGuy. It's right down there. Hey, for all the, as Wasteland McCarthy would say, right?
For all the robust discussion.
See, right there, robust discussion alert. There it is. Got to play it a little bit. There you go. And if you want to see me, well, it's going to be on the channel you're watching right now at OG55 at Freshly Squeezed, your source for juicy news and info squeezed fresh right from the Grove. So that is where you can find me. There we go. We'll keep it simple.
Perfect. Well, I want to thank everybody for watching today. A lot of my fans that watch my channel, you guys are probably not aware of Eric July. You're probably not aware of the Ripperverse. So I hope we kind of explained him as a content creator, where you kind of understood where he's coming from and this new comic book company. And we really want to hear from you. What do you think about how this concept of this apolitical kind of media company, how does that play into Disney? Right. And how's that play into how Disney wants to move forward? We would love to hear from you guys and gals. And as always, have a wonderful, wonderful day.